name's Leanne, and I'm part of the Vancouver Startup Week team. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we're grateful to be virtually gathered on Indigenous land, regardless of where you're joining us from today. I personally am here at my home in Vancouver, and I'm grateful to be on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. I'm privileged to live, work, and play on these lands. I want to thank you for joining us for VSW 2021, and welcome to today's session, Tips for Giving and Receiving Feedback, hosted by Bench Accounting. If you have any questions for our speakers, be sure to post your question in the Q&A section on the Whova platform. You can also upvote your questions as well, and we will ask them at the end of today's session. Without further ado, I'd like to pass the microphone over to our speaker, Ryan from Bench Accounting, and we'll begin the session. Over to you, Ryan.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hey, everybody. I am so thankful to be here and sharing with you guys on an early Friday morning. I hope Vancouver Startup Week is going extremely well for all of you, and I look forward to connecting with you guys. As she mentioned, if you have any questions at all, please drop them in the Q&A. I've got it pulled up on my cell phone so I can see any new questions coming through. Looks like we've already got a couple that we'll get to at the end of this session. Perfect, great. Let me share my screen and we will get rolling here. All right, great. Fearless feedback. Let's see. There we go, perfect. All right, first I just want to introduce myself. So who am I? My name is Ryan Berner. I'm the manager of inbound sales at Bench Accounting. I'm originally from Knoxville, Tennessee. So if you hear a little bit of Southern twang come out, that is definitely where it's coming from. After I lived in Tennessee until I was about 29, moved to Chicago for a little bit following a job. And from there, I traveled in Southeast Asia for a little while and was so inspired, loved it so much that I actually wound up coming home, selling everything that I owned, and moving to a little island off of the coast of Vietnam called Phu Quoc. Lived there for 2 years, playing music and doing a little bit of consulting work. I met my fiance there. She is originally from Canada, which is what brought me to Vancouver, be closer to her family. And outside of work, I'm a musician. I sing, play guitar, play piano, drums, everything. Very passionate about this. And I'm also a bourbon enthusiast. Probably I could probably just as qualified to talk about bourbon as I am fearless feedback, but that's more of a Friday afternoon session, not so much a Friday morning session. Maybe we could put that in the agenda next time.
Ryan, so sorry to interrupt. I wanted to just quickly pause us just because it looks like we're having some technical difficulties for some of our attendees. So I don't want anyone to miss out on any of your presentation. So if you wouldn't mind, we'll just give it a quick second. To anyone who's watching, if you can hear us but can't see us, just hit a quick refresh on your browser and we will see if that will work. And it looks like the list is slowly growing as we're going from there. So sorry about that.
Oh, it's all good. Hey, this would not be a tech startup week if we did not have technical difficulties.
Absolutely. And as we're doing that, we are looking like connectivity is working for everyone. So back over to you, Ryan.
Awesome. Thank you so much. For anybody who missed, I was just quickly introducing myself, the least important part of this presentation, but there's my little story right there. Happy to chat about any of this. If you have any questions about this, like she said, just drop it in the chat. Perfect. Awesome. So who is Bench? At a fundamental level, Bench solves bookkeeping for entrepreneurs. This is what we are extremely good at and what we are extremely passionate about. But a larger purpose expands beyond that. We're here to help entrepreneurs understand what they want to do and where they want to go. And our mission is to profoundly impact the lives of 1 million people. Yeah, so we do this through, educating our clients and taking a big piece of the hardship of owning a business, which is the bookkeeping aspect, the financial piece, tax filing, tax advisory, And we offload that so entrepreneurs can go and do what they are most passionate about, which is grow their business. And we will handle all of the bookkeeping, all of the financial needs of those businesses. We are currently only serving US clients, but happy to chat with anybody if you have any questions at all about what Bench does and how we help our clients. So today's agenda, I'm going to go through what is feedback, why is it important. I was going to do a small group discussion, but I realized that this is more of a presentation, not something that people can drop in a chat or talk back. So we'll just talk about some of the miscommunications in communication. We're going to talk about the SBI feedback model, which is what we here at Bench use to give and receive feedback. And then at the end, just a small commitment that I would ask of all of you to take some of what you've learned today and take it into your workplace. Perfect. So what is feedback? This is actually interesting. If you look up the definition of feedback, you actually get two answers. One is about the type of feedback that we're actually talking about today, and the other is about sound. And being a musician, I know a lot about this. So feedback in sound is when an audio loop is created between an input like a guitar or a microphone and an output like an amplifier or a speaker. And I'll get to our definition here in a bit, but there's an interesting parallel between the two. See, when most of us hear audio feedback, it's that loud, high screeching noise. It's ear deafening. You typically hear it at probably like a really bad karaoke bar or like a bad presentation. If the mic accidentally like points towards the speaker and it's that really, really high pitched noise, and we hate it. But that's because in those situations, the people don't know how to use the feedback. But then artists like Jimi Hendrix, Tom Morello, some early influences in the punk movement, they started to incorporate feedback into their sound and started by just practicing it and using it to create something new and better. Something in the music industry that we never knew was possible before. And the same principle exists in giving and receiving feedback, which is what we're talking about today. If it's done poorly, it's terrible. And it makes you just want to put your hands over your ears and just like avoid it at all costs. But if you do it correctly and practice how to use it, it can open doors that you just never knew were possible before. So fearless feedback is a method of communicating that something or some behavior is either working well or needs to be improved. And this is my most important thing that I can leave you with, is that it comes from a place of caring and possibility. If you're giving feedback just to make someone feel bad about an action that they made or driving them down, this is not productive in the workplace, and it does not lead to the second piece, which is possibility of improving and actually getting better. So anytime you're approaching feedback conversations, you really want to step back and think like, am I coming from a place of caring and possibility before you have that just initial gut reaction to a situation. Why is it important? These are just three of my favorite quotes about feedback that come from some very, very smart people. Elon Musk says, I think it's very important to have a feedback loop where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. And Bill Gates, we all need people who give us feedback. That's how we improve. And Michael D. Haberman, people cannot improve if they are not receiving feedback and allowed to make corrections. That is probably my favorite quote because it goes back to that piece of caring and possibility. So communication misconceptions. This is where I was going to have a little interactive true or false. But if I say it, the other person will understand. You know, a lot of people think that that's true, and a lot of times it's actually false. We all have different methods of communicating, both receiving and giving. And just because you say it does not mean that it's going to be interpreted the same way that you meant to come across. The more communication, the better. Sometimes is the answer. We ask this when we get a lot of like truths, we get a lot of falses because people think it's a trick question, but the answer is that it's probably somewhere in the middle because it's very situational. Some people over communicating feedback can lead and cause anxiety or cause them to like mentally retreat on the situation, not be able to comprehend the main point of what you're trying to get across. So the more communication, the better. It depends on the person that you're actually giving the feedback to. This is another piece that I'll pause and talk about real fast, is that it's so vitally important to understand the feedback uh, best practices for the individual that you're giving feedback to. So if you are a leader and you are, or working for a leader that you're, should be giving feedback to, it's really important to understand the style of feedback in which that person prefers to be receiving feedback. For me personally, I like to be spoken to, but the most I get from feedback is when it's written, because I like to reread it, make sure I understand the main points of it, and I can action it and come back to it later. So that is my feedback style, and everyone that works for me and that I work for knows that I prefer to receive feedback in that way. And so my Slack channels are constantly coming in with these long feedback um, uh, information, and that is my preferred method. Any problem can be solved at any time if we communicate with each other. Once again, some people say, yes, this is true, and others say, no, this is false. And once again, the answer is depends. And sometimes, not every problem can be solved by just communicating. Um, there's oftentimes that more goes into it than that, whether it's just time or, going and just be by yourself. Like maybe sometimes that is like a very real thing that people need. And over communicating in those times where people just need space is not the most proactive thing that you can be doing. Communication is a natural ability. Some have it, some don't. I think this was like a very common misconception back in the day. I think the new, or not the new generation, but the new thought is that um, people understand that this is not just a natural ability, that it is actually a skill that you have to work on and that you have to continually um, practice to actually get better on it. And feedback is the same way. You have to be consistently giving feedback and receiving feedback to get better at it. Um, we talk about it a lot on our DEI team, but we constantly are going to make mistakes. We are going to fail at giving feedback. We're going to fail at communicating. But I like to say the only mistake is one that we don't learn from. So if you are adamant about learning and understanding, then you'll be able to practice this feedback even through those mistakes and get better over time. The same thing goes with communication. All right, how to give feedback. So like I said earlier, we at Bench, we practice the SBI model. So S being situation. What is the situation in which you want to give feedback on? What is the behavior that you want to give feedback on? What did the person specifically do? And what is the impact? So the feedback conversation, I'm going to be walking through that SBI model and giving you a real life situation that happened to me just about a month ago with one of the team leads who reports up to me. So introduce the situation that you want to discuss, the context to bring it back to what happened. The more specific, the better. So this was about a month ago. I recently joined Bench in January. And as the manager of the inbound sales teams, I defaulted to believing that the topics for training were left to me and my discretion. So we have a monthly planning session around training. And there is one of the team leads who has been tasked with developing the training, all the courses that we do on an ongoing basis. And so I went into the meeting and I basically just kind of bulldogged it and said, hey, this month I want us to be training on creating urgency and building value. Okay, now you guys go and create the content, create the sessions, and all that. Um, and so this individual who had been in the past coming up with the concepts had very direct feedback for me that he felt like I steamrolled and kind of overstepped my boundaries and what was his responsibility in actually developing this content. So he came to me first. He had written it out, which I told, like I said, I love. but came to me and had an open conversation and said, Ryan, in the training meeting, when we were talking about what next month's topics for training would be, you, and then we go on to the behavior. Describe the behavior from the situation that you want to discuss. Keep it factual and keep it from the point of view. Focus on the what so this individual can bring the why to the situation. So, said in this meeting, during training, talking about next month, so this is the situation, you, Ryan, steamrolled me and came up with a training guide without first consulting me. So that's the behavior. And then next that we're going to talk about is the impact. Share the impact that the behavior had on yourself. Don't shy away from expressing emotions, but focus on fact. So he said, it made me feel that I was no longer in charge of developing this training. And it made me feel that I was less and underappreciated and not capable of running these training sessions. This is great feedback for me. It was a miscommunication on my or a missed expectation on my end to assume that this was a responsibility that defaulted to me, and for me to go in there with just like such a powerful stance and to kind of like take away this opportunity for him and something that he's been doing extremely well. There was no reason for me to take this away from him. So very clearly introduced the situation in this meeting that we had, the behavior of me actually just saying this is what training is going to look like for the next month, and then the impact of making him feel not valued in that situation. Shifting a little bit. So anytime we're giving and receiving feedback, we always want to challenge our own perspective. And this is just like a good life lesson, I think, in general. But these are a few lenses that we talk about in at Bench when we're talking about giving and receiving feedback. So the reverse lens. What would the other person say in this situation? So when this team lead came to me with this feedback, that was the first thing I did is, okay, through his eyes, how would my approach and what I did affect him? And for him, I challenged him to do the same thing to look through the situation through his lens or through my lens, and understand that as a leader, I had assumed that this was a responsibility that defaulted to me. So by both of us looking into the other person's perspective, we were able to come to a conclusion and understanding that hey, this is a miscommunication and an opportunity for us to get better in the future. Long lens. How will I most likely view the situation in 6 months? So this is a great piece of like, okay, so 6 months from now, like, how are we going to approach the same training module? And how would he approach the same training module? Wide lens. Regardless of the outcome of this issue, how can I grow and learn from it? Once again, probably my most important thing and my favorite piece of giving feedback is the opportunity and ability to get better and to adapt and to learn. So regardless of the outcome of us shifting the training back to him and solely on his plate and responsibility, what can I learn? And for me, it was I can learn to, one, not assume that all responsibilities just default to me as a leader. Two, to like bring more people into the conversation around what training we should actually be doing. Just because I had a focus on what I wanted us to do training on for the next month does not mean that other people weren't seeing other things that we could have possibly had a better or more productive experience in training on. So those are two things that I definitely learned from this situation. Perfect. So putting it into practice. So how do we actually do this? Like give feedback and like make it a very productive session. The first is prepare for the feedback. This is so vitally important. Just like with anything that you're doing in life that may be uncomfortable or something that you're working on getting better at, you want to practice it and you want to prepare for it. So think through the SBI framework and come from a place of curiosity and authenticity. Really trying to map out exactly what the situation was, what the behavior was, and what the impact was. Ask the person to meet privately. This Seems like a no-brainer, but it is something that's definitely important, is to make sure that you're not giving this feedback in a place that could be embarrassing or cause anxiety. You want to do this in a very private setting. Deliver feedback structured as the situation, behavior, and impact and the behavior it had on you. Be part of the solution. This is a great piece, is that when you're giving feedback as a leader to somebody who works for you, oftentimes you want to default to, hey, this is your issue, this is what I want you to improve on, now go improve upon it. What I would challenge you is to kind of rethink through that and actually come up with a solution with that person. So if you see a problem, be a part of the solution and set a follow-up. This is something that is so often missed in giving feedback, is when you do it, you want to create an actionable and measurable way to where you can go in 2 weeks, a month, 2 months from now, and look back and have a conversation and say, hey, did we learn from this? Actually, did we actually take something meaningful away from this feedback conversation, and how have we done since then? Did we actually make change? Great. And this is the last piece for me. Is just, I want you guys all to commit to providing both constructive and positive feedback within the next week. This is, once again, an uncomfortable thing, but tell a colleague and ensure that they hold you accountable. We at Bench believe that feedback is not a top-down exercise. We very, at a fundamental level, believe and rely on feedback in a loop. And my direct reports are giving me feedback on how I can be improving every single day. Their reports are also giving me direct feedback. And then I'm giving feedback to my boss and people above me. I'm giving feedback to our vice president and CEO. And it creates a very open culture. And it is vitally important, in my opinion and in our opinion, for a successful startup, is to really lean into feedback, both positive and constructive, and at all levels. And that is it for me. I know I have a few questions here, and I see two. I don't see any more than that. But if you have any more, feel free to drop them in. But I will answer these two questions. So the first question is, what is your advice for delivering the bad news to someone that did not get a job, but in the best way possible? That is a great question, and it's a hard situation. Um, Something I like to do, one, is if I'm not, first off, I want to say there's a misconception in interviews that it is solely the business or company trying to find the best fit for them. Ideally, you're finding the best fit for the candidate and the company. That's a win-win situation. So as much as you are interviewing the candidate, you also want to remember that this is an interview of the candidate, or of you from the candidate's point of view. So, um, so somebody who did not get the job, I think it's a very formal email of, whatever the situation is. We went. I think honesty is key here. So we went with another candidate, but the biggest piece is offering to provide them feedback on the interview. What could they have done better? What could they have done, or what qualifications were they missing, that you were looking for an employee, and offer to meet with them again to give them some of this feedback so that they can better prepare for the next interview. I think this is a huge thing. At the end of the day, like, I know I just love people and love to help people however I can. So whether they are a good fit for Bench or not, what I want to consistently be doing is making sure that I'm doing everything I can to make sure that person has a good experience with us, but also set them up for a very successful endeavor in whatever job they want to go to next. I hope that answered your question. And next question, what is the best way of receiving negative feedback? Um, so if you're receiving negative feedback, I think you just First, I want to change the word from negative to constructive. I think that's an important differentiator. So when you say negative feedback, it has a bad connotation with it. Something I want to challenge you is thinking about it being constructive feedback. So feedback that actually has a purpose and ability to change something in the future. But the best way of receiving it, best way of giving it is to be honest and follow the SBI model like we just talked about it. Best way to receive it, um, I think you have to be in a place that you're open, that you are trusting of the person giving you the feedback, which plays into, how your leader or how you as a leader have developed a relationship with the people in your charge. Um, but it's built on trust, it's built on openness, it's built on empathy and patience and a willingness to learn and be better. The If you have the trust that your leader is giving you the feedback only for with their only interest in mind to make you better, then you can approach that situation with a positive mindset and think, okay, whatever this feedback is, while it may be a little bit hard to hear in the moment, it's actually setting me up to be successful in the future. So I think it's all about the mentality going into that conversation.